You're listening to Scary Sleep Stories presents The Dark Hours.
Farmhouse. An uneasy feeling settled in my stomach. The usually picturesque countryside seemed ominous, shadows stretching long in the late afternoon sun. I tried to shake off the feeling, chalking it up to an overactive imagination. I pulled up to the house, gravel crunching under my tires. The place looked wrong. Curtains drawn tight, no sign of the usual farm activity. The old pickup truck that was always parked out front was missing. Taking a deep breath, I stepped out of my car. The air was thick and still, not even a breeze to rustle the overgrown grass. As I approached the porch, I noticed scratch marks on the front door, deep gouges in the wood, as if someone, or something, had been desperately trying to get in or out. I knocked, the sound echoing ominously. "Hello, Mr. and Mrs. Johnson. It's Sarah from Social Services, just here for a check-in." No response. I knocked again, louder this time. Still nothing. Protocol dictated that I should leave if no one answered, but something kept me there. Call it intuition or foolishness, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. I tried the door handle. To my surprise, it turned easily. As the door swung open, that coppery smell hit me full force. I gagged, my hand flying to my mouth. "Hello?" I called out again, my voice shaky. "Is anyone home?" Silence greeted me, broken only by the creak of floorboards under my feet as I stepped inside. The interior of the house was dark, curtains drawn against the fading daylight. As my eyes adjusted, I saw signs of a struggle. A lamp lay shattered on the floor, a chair overturned. And then I saw the blood. It was everywhere, splattered across the walls, pooled on the hardwood floor. My heart raced, every instinct screaming at me to run. But I couldn't. If there was any chance someone was still alive, I had to find them. I moved deeper into the house, my shoes sticking slightly to the tacky floor. The living room was a disaster, furniture overturned, picture frames smashed. Whatever had happened here, it had been violent. As I approached the kitchen, I heard a sound that made my blood run cold, a soft whimper, barely audible. It was coming from upstairs. "Hello?" I called out, louder now. "Is someone there? I'm here to help." Another whimper, slightly louder this time. Definitely human. I made my way to the stairs, my hand shaking as I gripped the banister. Each step creaked under my weight, the sound impossibly loud in the silent house. At the top of the stairs, I paused. The blood trail continued, leading down the hallway to a closed door at the end. The whimpering was clearer now, punctuated by soft sobs. I approached the door slowly, my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. "I'm coming in," I announced, my voice barely above a whisper. I turned the handle and pushed the door open. The room was dark, but I could make out a small figure huddled in the corner. As my eyes adjusted, I saw it was a child, a little girl, no more than 6 or 7. "Hey there," I said softly, trying to keep my voice calm despite the terror coursing through me. "My name's Sarah. I'm here to help. Are you hurt?" The girl looked up, her eyes wide with fear. She was covered in blood, her blonde hair matted with it. But as I looked closer, I realized with relief that she didn't appear to be injured. The blood wasn't hers. I took a step towards her, and she flinched. "It's okay," I soothed. "I'm not going to hurt you. Can you tell me your name?" "Lucy," she stammered. "My name is Lucy." "Hi, Lucy," I said, kneeling down to her level. "Can you tell me what happened? Where are your parents?" At the mention of her parents, Lucy's face crumpled. She began to sob in earnest, her small body shaking. I moved closer, fighting every instinct that was telling me to grab the child and run. "It's okay, sweetie. You're safe now. Can you tell me where your parents are?" Lucy pointed a trembling finger towards the closet. My gaze followed, and I noticed for the first time that the closet door was slightly ajar. A dark liquid was seeping out from under it, spreading across the carpet. My stomach lurched. I knew what I would find, but I had to be sure. "Lucy," I said, my voice as steady as I could make it. "I need you to close your eyes for me, okay? And keep them closed until I say it's all right to open them. Can you do that for me?" She nodded, squeezing her eyes shut tight. I stood up on shaky legs and approached the closet. The smell was overwhelming now. I reached for the door handle, took a deep breath, and pulled it open. What I saw will haunt me for the rest of my days. Mr. and Mrs. Johnson were there, or what was left of them. Their bodies were mutilated beyond recognition, and there, huddled between them, was a little boy, Lucy's brother. His eyes were open, staring blankly. He'd been dead for days. I staggered back, bile rising in my throat. I managed to close the door before I lost the contents of my stomach on the bedroom floor. As I wiped my mouth, my mind raced. What could have done this? It looked like an animal attack, but no animal I knew of could have caused this level of devastation. And how had Lucy survived? I turned back to the little girl, still huddled in the corner with her eyes squeezed shut. I needed to get her out of here, now. "Lucy," I said, my voice hoarse. "You can open your eyes now. We're going to leave, okay? I'm going to take you somewhere safe." She nodded, her eyes fluttering open. I held out my hand, and after a moment's hesitation, she took it. As we made our way downstairs, I pulled out my phone to call the police. No signal. Of course. We stepped outside, the fresh air a blessed relief from the horror inside. I led Lucy to my car, helping her into the back seat. As I closed the door, I heard something that made my heart stop. A low, guttural growl. I turned slowly, my eyes scanning the overgrown field beside the house. There, at the edge of the tall grass, I saw movement. Something large, moving on all fours, In the fading light, I caught a glimpse of matted fur, of long, sharp claws, and eyes, glowing in the twilight, fixed directly on me. I didn't think, I didn't breathe, I just moved. I yanked open the driver's door, threw myself inside, and turned the key. The engine roared to life just as the creature burst from the grass, charging towards us. I slammed the car into reverse, tires spinning in the gravel. In the rearview mirror, I saw it gaining on us, impossibly fast. Its jaws were open, revealing rows of razor-sharp teeth. We hit the road and I shifted into drive, flooring the accelerator. The creature was right behind us, so close I could hear its claws scraping against the trunk. "Hold on, Lucy," I shouted, swerving to try and shake it off. For miles, it chased us. Every time I thought we'd lost it, I'd catch a glimpse of it in the mirror, tireless, relentless. It wasn't until we hit the main road, other cars appearing around us, that it finally fell back. As we sped towards the city, lights appearing on the horizon, I allowed myself to breathe. Lucy was curled up in the back seat, silent. I glanced back at her, this tiny survivor of unimaginable horror. "It's okay," I said, trying to convince myself as much as her. "We're safe now." But as I drove through the night, my hands shaking on the steering wheel, I knew that wasn't true. We had escaped, yes, but safety, that was an illusion that had been shattered forever. Whatever that thing was, it was still out there. And as the adrenaline faded and the reality of what I'd seen began to sink in, I realized that my life, and Lucy's, would never be the same. The quiet countryside I'd driven through just hours ago now seemed full of shadows, of hidden dangers, and I knew that from this night forward, every darkness would hold the potential for terror, every silence the promise of that bone-chilling growl. As we drove into the city, the familiar skyline offering little comfort, I made a silent vow. I would protect Lucy. I would find out what happened to her family. And somehow, someday, I would make sense of the nightmare we'd lived through. But deep down, I knew Some horrors can't be explained. Some terrors don't end when the sun rises. And sometimes, the monsters that hide in the shadows are all too real. The day I stopped a child trafficking ring started like any other shift at the beach. But by sunset, I'd stared evil in the face and realized that monsters don't always hide in the shadows. Sometimes they walk among us in broad daylight. My name's Mike, and I've been a lifeguard at Sunset Beach for 5 summers now. It's usually a pretty sweet gig: sun, sand, and the occasional heroic rescue to impress the ladies. But nothing in my training prepared me for what happened that scorching July afternoon. The day began normally enough. I climbed up to my perch on the lifeguard tower, slathered on sunscreen, and surveyed my domain. The beach was already packed. Families staking out spots with colorful umbrellas and coolers. Kids shrieked with laughter as they splashed in the shallows, while teenagers showed off on surfboards further out. Around midday, I noticed a group of men arrive. There were 4 of them, all in their late 30s or early 40s. Something about them seemed off from the get-go. They were dressed too nicely for the beach, button-up shirts and pressed khakis instead of swim trunks and tank tops. And unlike everyone else soaking up the sun, they huddled together in the shade of a large umbrella. At first, I tried to brush off my unease. Maybe they were just some businessmen on lunch break, enjoying the view. But as the afternoon wore on, their behavior grew increasingly suspicious. They never went near the water or even took off their shoes. Instead, they sat rigid in their chairs, eyes constantly scanning the beach. Every so often, one would mutter something to the others, who'd nod gravely in response. But what really set off alarm bells was the way they watched the children. Their gazes followed kids as they ran past, lingering a bit too long. One man had a camera and seemed to be taking an awful lot of photos in the direction of the playground. Another kept checking his watch and muttering about on the schedule. A chill ran down my spine despite the sweltering heat. I'd seen my fair share of creeps on the beach before, but this felt different, more organized, more sinister. I radioed my supervisor, Jake Starm, and shared my concerns. "Keep an eye on them," he advised, "but don't engage unless you see them actually do something. We can't accuse people without proof." I nodded, but my gut twisted with unease. What if waiting for proof meant a child disappeared? As the afternoon progressed, the men's behavior grew bolder. They split up, each taking a different section of the beach. It was like they were creating a perimeter. One positioned himself near the snack bar, another by the restrooms, while the other 2 lingered near the main entrances. My heart raced as I realized what they were doing. They were cutting off escape routes. I scanned the beach frantically, looking for any kids who might be in immediate danger. That's when I spotted her, a little girl, maybe 6 or 7, building a sandcastle near the water's edge. She was just out of her mother's line of sight, who was distracted chatting with a friend. And one of the men was walking straight toward her. Time seemed to slow down. I saw his lips move as he knelt beside her, pointing out toward the water as if showing her something. The girl smiled, nodding eagerly. He held out his hand. I didn't think. I just moved. I leaped down from my tower and sprinted across the sand, my whistle between my teeth. I blew it hard as I ran, the shrill sound cutting through the beach noise. "Hey!" I shouted as I neared them. "Step away from the child." The man's head snapped up, his eyes widening in surprise, then narrowing in anger. He dropped the girl's hand and bolted. I wanted to chase him, but the girl's safety came first. I skidded to a stop beside her as her mother came running over, alerted by my whistle. "What's going on?" she demanded, scooping up her daughter. "Ma'am, I need you to stay with your child and alert a staff member if you see that man again," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "He may have been trying to abduct her." The color drained from her face as she clutched her daughter tighter. I didn't wait for a response, already scanning the beach for the other suspects. They were on the move, clearly realizing their cover was blown. I saw one making a beeline for the parking lot, and, while another was quickly packing up their belongings, I grabbed my radio. "Jake, it's Mike. Those men I told you about, they just tried to lure a child away. I think we're dealing with traffickers. We need to lock down the beach now." Jake's response was immediate. Copy that. I'm calling the police. Don't approach them alone, Mike. These guys could be dangerous. But I was already running toward the parking lot, determination overriding caution. I couldn't let them get away. Not when children's lives were at stake. I reached the lot just as one of the men was climbing into a dark SUV. Without thinking, I grabbed a beach umbrella from a nearby stand and hurled it like a javelin. It crashed through the SUV's back window, startling the man enough that he stalled the engine. I used those precious seconds to close the distance, yanking open the driver's side door. "Out of the car!" I yelled, grabbing his arm. He swung at me, his fist connecting with my jaw. Stars exploded in my vision, but adrenaline kept me upright. I tackled him, both of us tumbling onto the asphalt. We grappled there in the parking lot, trading blows. He was stronger than I expected, but I had youth and righteous anger on my side. I managed to pin him down just as sirens wailed in the distance. "It's over," I panted, tasting blood. "The cops are coming. You're done." His eyes blazed with hatred. "You have no idea what you've done," he spat. The police arrived moments later, quickly taking control of the situation. As they cuffed the man I'd subdued, I saw 2 of his compatriots being led away in handcuffs as well. The 4th, unfortunately, had managed to escape in the chaos. The next few hours passed in a blur of questioning and statements. The police praised my quick thinking but admonished me for putting myself in danger. I barely heard them, my mind reeling as the full impact of what had almost happened sank in. These men had been methodically planning to snatch children from right under our noses. How long had they been operating? How many kids had they already taken from other beaches, other towns? As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the now empty beach, a detective pulled me aside. "You did good work today, son," he said gravely. "We've been trying to crack this trafficking ring for months. Thanks to you, we've finally got some solid leads." I nodded, a lump forming in my throat. "Those kids," I managed to ask, "will they be okay?" The detective's expression softened. "The ones here today? Yes, thanks to you. But there are others out there who still need saving. This is bigger than just one beach, I'm afraid." His words hit me like a punch to the gut. I looked out over the darkening water, thinking of all the children who might be out there, scared and alone. And I made a decision. "How can I help?" I asked, turning back to the detective. "I want to do more." He studied me for a moment, then nodded. "We could use someone with your instincts and dedication. It won't be easy, and it's sure as hell not as glamorous as being a lifeguard. But if you're serious, come down to the station tomorrow. We'll talk." That night, as I lay in bed replaying the day's events, I knew my life had changed irrevocably. The beach I'd loved, the job I'd enjoyed, they suddenly seemed trivial in the face of the darkness I'd glimpsed. I thought of that little girl, of how close she'd come to being snatched away from everything she knew and loved. And I thought of all the other children out there who might not be as lucky. Sleep eluded me as I wrestled with the weight of my new knowledge. The world suddenly seemed a much darker, more dangerous place. But as I watched the first rays of dawn creep across my ceiling, I felt a steely resolve settle in my chest. I couldn't unsee what I'd witnessed. I couldn't unhear that man's chilling words. But I could use this experience, this anger and determination, to make a difference. As I got up to face the new day, I knew my time as a carefree lifeguard was over. A different kind of vigilance was needed now. The monsters were real, hiding in plain sight, and someone had to stand against them. Today I'd stop being just a guardian of the beach. I'd become a guardian of innocence itself. And God help anyone who tried to harm a child on my watch again. I never thought a dusty old box would be the key to unlocking a world of danger and intrigue. But as I crouched in the shadows, listening to the voices of ruthless smugglers, I realized that some treasures are better left buried. My name is Dr. Amelia Carter, and I'm an archaeologist specializing in ancient Egyptian artifacts. I've spent years studying hieroglyphs and piecing together the mysteries of the past, but nothing in my studies could have prepared me for the heart-pounding adventure that began on a sweltering day in the Valley of the Kings. It was my third season, working on a dig site near Luxor. The heat was oppressive, the sun beating down mercilessly as my team and I carefully excavated a promising area. We'd been at it for weeks, unearthing pottery shards and the occasional bit of jewelry, but nothing extraordinary. That all changed when my trowel hit something solid. "Hey, guys," I called out, excitement bubbling in my voice. "I think I found something." My colleagues gathered around as I carefully brushed away the sand. Slowly, the object began to take shape, a small wooden box, intricately carved with symbols I didn't recognize. Dr. Carter, my assistant, Tom, whispered in awe, "This doesn't look like anything we've seen before." He was right. The box didn't fit with the time period we were excavating. It was older, much older, and far better preserved than it should have been. With trembling hands, I lifted the box from its resting place. It was surprisingly heavy for its size, and I could hear something shifting inside. "Let's get this back to the lab," I said, cradling the box like a newborn. "We need to document everything before we open it." Back at our makeshift lab, we carefully photographed and measured the box. The hieroglyphs were unlike any I'd seen before, a mixture of known symbols and completely foreign ones. It was maddening. I could almost understand it, but crucial pieces were missing. As the sun set, casting long shadows across the desert, we finally prepared to open the box. My heart raced as I carefully lifted the lid. Inside, nestled on a bed of what looked like silk, were several small artifacts. A golden scarab beetle, its eyes made of deep red gems, a set of small tools, their purpose unclear, and most intriguingly, a collection of papyrus scrolls, miraculously preserved. "This is incredible," I breathed, carefully unrolling one of the scrolls. The writing was crisp and clear, as if it had been penned yesterday instead of thousands of years ago. This could change everything we know about ancient Egyptian culture. We worked late into the night, cataloging and photographing each item. It wasn't until the early hours of the morning that I finally collapsed into my cot, my mind whirling with the possibilities this discovery presented. The next few days were a blur of excitement and research. We kept the find under wraps, not wanting to alert the media until we had a better understanding of what we were dealing with. But as I delved deeper into translating the scrolls, a sense of unease began to grow. The texts spoke of hidden temples, of rituals and powers that defied explanation, and more worryingly, of a group dedicated to protecting these secrets at all costs. It was on the 5th night after our discovery that things took a dark turn. I was working late in the lab, poring over one of the scrolls, when I heard voices outside, angry voices, speaking in hushed tones. Curiosity got the better of me. I crept to the window, peeking out from behind the curtain. What I saw made my blood run cold. 2 men, dressed in dark clothes, were arguing with one of our local workers. I couldn't make out what they were saying, but their body language was clear. They were threatening him. I watched, heart pounding, as they pressed something into the worker's hand, money, I assumed, and then melted back into the shadows. Sleep eluded me that night. Who were those men? What did they want? A part of me hoped it was unrelated to our discovery, but deep down, I knew better. The next morning, I pulled Tom aside. "We need to be careful," I told him, recounting what I'd seen. I think someone might be after the artifacts." Tom's face paled. "What do we do? Should we tell the authorities?" I shook my head. "Not yet. We don't know who we can trust. For now, let's just keep everything under tight security. Don't let anyone near the artifacts unless I'm present." But despite our precautions, the atmosphere at the dig site changed. I felt eyes on me constantly. Whispered conversations would stop abruptly when I approached. And then, items started to go missing. Small things at first. A notebook here, a tool there. But it was enough to set me on edge. It all came to a head a week later. I was working late again, trying to decipher a particularly tricky passage in one of the scrolls. The lab was quiet, everyone else having retired for the night. A noise outside made me jump. Footsteps, trying to be quiet but failing in the stillness of the night. I quickly turned off my lamp and ducked behind a large crate, my heart thundering in my chest. The door creaked open. 2 figures slipped inside, their faces obscured by the darkness. They moved with purpose, heading straight for the safe where we kept the artifacts. "Hurry up," one of them hissed. "We need to get this done before anyone notices." I watched in horror as they expertly cracked the safe, pulling out the box and its precious contents. They worked quickly, transferring everything into a backpack. I must have made a noise, a gasp, a shifting of my weight, because suddenly, one of them whirled around, peering into the darkness where I hid. "Someone's here," he growled. I didn't wait. I bolted, knocking over equipment in my haste to get to the door. Behind me, I heard shouts and the sound of pursuit. I ran into the night, the cool desert air whipping past me. I had no plan, no destination in mind, just an overwhelming need to get away, to protect the knowledge we'd uncovered. I don't know how long I ran. My lungs burned, my legs ached, but fear kept me going. Eventually, I found myself in a small copse of trees, an oasis in the desert. Collapsing behind a large rock, I tried to catch my breath and think, what could I do? Who could I trust? As if in answer to my unspoken questions, I heard the rumble of an approaching vehicle. Peering out from my hiding spot, I saw a Jeep pull up. Tom jumped out, looking frantic. "Dr. Carter," he called out. "Are you here?" "It's me, Tom. You're in danger." Relief flooded through me. I stumbled out from behind the rock. "Tom, thank God. They took the artifacts. We need to..." My words died in my throat. Behind Tom, emerging from the Jeep, were the 2 men I'd seen in the lab. Tom's face fell. "I'm so sorry, Dr. Carter," he said, his voice heavy with regret. "They have my family. I didn't have a choice." I backed away, my mind reeling with betrayal. But there was nowhere to run. The men approached, their expressions grim. "Dr. Carter," one of them said, his voice surprisingly gentle. "We don't want to hurt you, but you've stumbled onto something bigger than you can imagine, something that needs to stay hidden." "Who are you?" I demanded, trying to keep the fear out of my voice. "We're keepers of an ancient secret," the other man replied. "The artifacts you found, they're part of something dangerous, something that could upset the balance of the world if it fell into the wrong hands." I wanted to laugh. It sounded absurd, like something out of a movie. But the gravity in their eyes, the way Tom wouldn't meet my gaze, it made a horrifying kind of sense. "What happens now?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. The first man sighed. "Now, you have a choice. You can come with us, learn the truth about what you've discovered, help us protect it, or..." He didn't need to finish the sentence. The implication was clear. I looked at Tom, at the artifacts peeking out of the backpack, at the vast desert around us. In that moment, I realized that the quiet life I'd known, the simple pursuit of knowledge, it was over. I took a deep breath. "I'll come with you," I said, "but I want answers. All of them." The men nodded, relief evident on their faces. As they led me to the Jeep, I cast one last look at the dig site in the distance, the place where my old life had ended, and a new, dangerous chapter had begun. As we drove off into the night, the box of artifacts secure between us, I couldn't help but wonder, in uncovering the secrets of the past, had I sealed my own fate? Only time would tell. But one thing was certain: the dusty world of archaeology would never be the same for me again. I always thought I was a good judge of character, but on that rainy night, as the stranger in my passenger seat revealed his true nature, I realized how deadly wrong I could be. My name's Sarah, and I've been driving for a rideshare company for about a year now. It's not glamorous, but it pays the bills and lets me meet all sorts of interesting people. At least, that's what I used to think before that fateful night. It was a Friday evening in late October, the kind of night where the rain comes down in sheets, turning the world into a blur of neon reflections and headlights. I'd been driving for hours, ferrying drunk college kids and weary office workers through the slick streets of downtown. I was just about to call it quits when my phone pinged with one last ride request. The pickup location was on the outskirts of town, near an old industrial park. Not the safest area, but the surge pricing was too good to pass up. Besides, I told myself, what were the odds of something bad happening on my very last ride? As I pulled up to the address, I saw a lone figure standing under a flickering streetlight. He was tall and lean, wearing a dark hoodie pulled low over his face. A small duffel bag was slung over his shoulder. I hesitated for a moment, my instincts screaming at me to drive away. But then I remembered all the times I'd been judged unfairly based on my appearance. Who was I to do the same to this guy? I unlocked the doors and he slid into the back seat, bringing with him the smell of rain and something else I couldn't quite place. "Thanks for stopping," he said, his voice low and gravelly. Not many people would pick up a guy like me in this part of town. I forced a smile, meeting his eyes in the rearview mirror. They were dark and intense, sending a shiver down my spine. "No problem," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "Where to?" He gave me an address about an hour outside of town. It was way out of my usual area, but the fare would be substantial. I punched it into my GPS and pulled away from the curb. For the first few minutes, we drove in silence. The only sounds were the rhythmic swish of the wipers and the patter of rain on the roof. I tried to focus on the road, but I could feel his eyes on me, watching my every move. "So," I said, desperate to break the tension, "what brings you out to the middle of nowhere on a night like this?" He was quiet for so long I thought he hadn't heard me. When he finally spoke, his words sent ice through my veins. "I'm running from something," he said. "Something bad." I gripped the steering wheel tighter, my knuckles turning white. "Oh," I managed to squeak out. "Like what?" He leaned forward, his breath hot on my ear. "The police," he whispered. "I've done something terrible, and they're after me." My heart was pounding so hard I was sure he could hear it. I tried to keep my voice calm as I asked, What did you do?" He sat back, and I could hear the smile in his voice. "Why don't you pull over and I'll show you?" Every instinct I had was screaming at me to floor it, to get as far away from this man as possible. But we were on a deserted stretch of highway, trees looming on either side. There was nowhere to go. I don't think that's a good idea," I stammered. "Maybe I should just take you to your destination." His hand shot out, gripping my shoulder with surprising strength. "Pull over. Now." I did as he said, easing the car onto the muddy shoulder. As soon as we stopped, he was out of the car, moving around to my door. I fumbled with the lock, but he was faster, yanking the door open and dragging me out into the rain. I stumbled, falling to my knees in the mud. When I looked up, he was standing over me, a wicked-looking knife glinting in his hand. "Please," I begged, rain and tears mingling on my face. "You don't have to do this." He crouched down, bringing the knife close to my cheek. "Oh, but I do," he said almost tenderly. "You see, I can't have any witnesses, and you, my dear, have seen far too much." I closed my eyes, waiting for the bite of the blade. But instead, I heard a sound that made my eyes fly open in shock. Laughter. The man was laughing, deep belly laughs that shook his whole body. And then, to my utter disbelief, he helped me to my feet. "Oh man," he said, wiping tears from his eyes. "You should see your face right now. Priceless." I stared at him, my mind struggling to process what was happening. What's going on?" He grinned, all traces of menace gone from his face. "It's a prank, sweetheart. For my YouTube channel. See? He pointed to a small camera attached to his hoodie. You've been punked. Relief washed over me, quickly followed by anger. Are you kidding me? I shouted, shoving him hard. You scared me half to death. What is wrong with you? His grin faltered. Hey, come on. It's just a joke. People love this stuff online. I was about to lay into him further when a new sound cut through the night. Sirens, growing closer by the second, the man's face drained of color. Shit, he muttered. Someone must have seen us and called the cops. We gotta go. But I stood my ground. No, I said firmly. I'm not going anywhere with you. You can explain your little prank to the police yourself. His expression hardened. I'm not asking, he growled, grabbing my arm. The menace was back in his voice, and this time, I knew it wasn't an act. I struggled against his grip, but he was too strong. He started dragging me back towards the car, his fingers digging painfully into my arm. In that moment, survival instinct took over. I remembered the self-defense class I'd taken years ago, the instructor's voice ringing in my ears. Use whatever you have as a weapon. My free hand closed around the car keys in my pocket. In one swift motion, I whipped them out and raked them across his face. He howled in pain, releasing my arm to clutch at his bleeding cheek. I didn't hesitate. I ran, sprinting down the highway towards the approaching sirens. I could hear him behind me, his footsteps pounding on the wet asphalt. But fear and adrenaline propelled me forward, faster than I'd ever run in my life. The police car came into view, its lights cutting through the rain. I waved my arms frantically, screaming for help. The car screeched to a halt, and 2 officers jumped out, guns drawn. Get down, one of them shouted. I dropped to the ground, my heart racing. I heard a scuffle behind me, then the sound of handcuffs clicking into place. As the officers helped me to my feet, I turned to see my attacker being shoved into the back of the police car. The look he gave me was one of pure hatred. Are you all right, ma'am? One of the officers asked, draping a blanket over my shoulders. I nodded, my whole body shaking with delayed shock. I think so. Thank you. Over the next few hours, I gave my statement to the police. It turned out the man, whose real name was Derek, had a history of similar pranks that had escalated to actual assaults. The duffel bag in my car contained rope, duct tape, and other items that made it clear his intentions were far from innocent. As I sat in the police station, sipping lukewarm coffee and trying to process everything that had happened, a detective approached me. Miss Johnson, he said gently, I know this has been a traumatic experience, but I want you to know that you likely saved lives tonight. We've been tracking this guy for months, but he always managed to stay one step ahead. Thanks to you, he's finally off the streets. His words should have made me feel better, but all I felt was numb. The realization of how close I'd come to becoming another statistic, another tragic headline, was overwhelming. In the days and weeks that followed, I struggled to return to normal life. Every time I got behind the wheel, I found myself checking and rechecking the locks. Every passenger became a potential threat. But slowly, with the help of therapy and the support of my friends and family, I began to heal. I learned that trusting my instincts wasn't the same as judging people unfairly, that it was okay to prioritize my safety over being polite. I never drove for the rideshare company again. Instead, I channeled my experience into advocating for stronger safety measures for drivers and passengers alike. I shared my story, hoping to help others trust their gut and stay safe. That rainy night changed me forever, but it also showed me a strength I never knew I had. And while I'll always be more cautious now, I refuse to let fear rule my life. After all, for every Derek in the world, there are countless good people, and that's a truth worth remembering, even on the darkest, rainiest nights. The night I discovered a criminal operation in the warehouse was the night I realized that sometimes the most dangerous secrets hide in the most mundane places. What started as a routine shift turned into a fight for survival that would change my life forever. My name's Jack, and I've been working night security at the Millennium Storage Warehouse for about 3 years now. It's not the most exciting job in the world, but it pays the bills and gives me plenty of time to work on my novel. At least, that's what I used to think before that fateful night. It was a Tuesday in late October, the kind of night where the wind howls around the corners of the building and every shadow seems to move. I'd just started my shift, settling into the small security office with a thermos of coffee and my dog-eared notebook. The first few hours passed uneventfully. I made my rounds, checking the locks and peering down the long aisles of crates and boxes. The warehouse was huge, a maze of steel shelving units stretching up to the ceiling. Most of the time, I found the solitude peaceful. But tonight, something felt off. Maybe it was the way the wind was making the metal roof creak and groan. Or maybe it was just that my imagination was working overtime after spending the day writing a particularly tense chapter of my crime novel. Whatever it was, I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. It was around 2 a.m. when I heard it. A faint sound, almost lost in the ambient noise of the building. But years of working nights had sharpened my hearing, and I knew it didn't belong. I muted the small TV in the security office and listened hard. There it was again. A metallic, clinking sound, followed by muffled voices. It was coming from the north section of the warehouse, an area that was supposed to be empty. My heart started to race. This wasn't like the other times I'd investigated strange noises, only to find a raccoon had gotten in or a stack of boxes had fallen over. This was different. This was human. I reached for my radio to call for backup, but as I keyed the mic, I realized I was out of range. The north section was the farthest point from the security office, and the signal couldn't penetrate the maze of metal shelving. I had a choice to make. I could go back to the office and call the police, potentially letting whoever was in here get away, or I could investigate myself and gather evidence. Looking back, I know I should have called the cops, but in that moment, fueled by adrenaline and maybe a little too much confidence from writing about fictional heroics, I decided to check it out myself. I grabbed my flashlight and made my way towards the north section, moving as quietly as I could. The voices grew louder as I approached, and I could make out snatches of conversation. "Hurry up, we don't have all night," one voice hissed. "I'm going as fast as I can," another replied. "This stuff is heavy." I crept closer, my heart pounding so loud I was sure they'd hear it. As I rounded a corner, I saw them, 5 men, all dressed in dark clothing, loading crates onto a forklift. I recognized one of the crates. It had come in last week, marked as electronic components for a local tech company. But as I watched, one of the men pried it open, revealing rows of weapons inside. My blood ran cold. This wasn't just a simple burglary. This was something much bigger, much more dangerous. I must have gasped or made some small noise, because suddenly, one of the men looked up. Our eyes met, and for a split second, the world seemed to freeze. Then all hell broke loose. "We've got company," the man shouted, reaching for something at his waist. I didn't wait to see what it was. I turned and ran, my feet pounding on the concrete floor. Behind me, I could hear shouts and the sound of pursuit. I weaved through the aisles, trying to lose them in the labyrinth of shelves, but they knew the layout too well. Every turn I took, it seemed like one of them was there, cutting off my escape. I found myself cornered in a dead-end aisle, the sounds of footsteps closing in from both sides. Desperate, I looked around for anything I could use as a weapon or a hiding place. That's when I saw it. A small gap between 2 massive crates, just big enough for me to squeeze through. Without hesitation, I dove in, scraping my arms and legs on the rough wood. I held my breath as the men ran past my hiding spot, their flashlight beams sweeping the area. For a moment, I thought I was safe, but then I heard one of them say, "Check every nook and cranny." He couldn't have gone far. I knew it was only a matter of time before they found me. I needed a plan, and fast. As quietly as I could, I fished my cell phone out of my pocket. No signal. Of course. I was about to give up hope when I remembered the emergency call feature. Even without a signal, I might be able to reach 911. With shaking fingers, I dialed the number and pressed the phone to my ear. The seconds it took to connect felt like an eternity. 911, what's your emergency? The operator's voice was the most beautiful sound I'd ever heard. In a whisper, I quickly explained the situation. I'm at Millennium Storage Warehouse. There are armed men here, smuggling weapons. I'm hiding, but they're looking for me. Please hurry. Sir, stay calm. We're dispatching units to your location now. Can you stay on the line? Before I could answer, a hand grabbed my ankle and yanked me out of my hiding spot. My phone clattered to the ground, the operator's voice still faintly audible. I found myself face to face with one of the men, his eyes cold and angry behind a ski mask. Thought you could hide from us, rent-a-cop? He sneered. I was hauled to my feet and dragged back to where the others were waiting. My arms were roughly tied behind my back, and I was shoved to my knees. What do we do with him? One of the men asked. The leader, a tall man with a scar running down his cheek, looked at me thoughtfully. We can't leave any witnesses, he said finally. Take care of him, then we'll finish loading and get out of here. My heart sank. This was it. I was going to die here, in this warehouse, all because I'd been too curious and too stupid to call for backup right away. As one of the men raised a gun, I closed my eyes, bracing for the end. But instead of a gunshot, I heard the most welcome sound in the world, police sirens, growing louder by the second. The warehouse erupted into chaos. The men scattered, dropping their weapons and running for the exits. I heard shouts of, "Police! Freeze!" and the sound of footsteps thundering all around me. When I opened my eyes, I was surrounded by officers. One of them was cutting the ties on my wrists, asking if I was okay. The next few hours passed in a blur of questions and statements. The police had caught most of the men, though a couple had managed to escape. They uncovered a massive weapons smuggling operation, one that had been running right under my nose for months. As the sun began to rise, casting long shadows through the warehouse windows, a detective approached me. "Mr. Thompson," he said, "I want you to know that your actions tonight have probably saved countless lives. The weapons we've seized here, well, let's just say they would have done a lot of damage in the wrong hands." I nodded, still in shock from the night's events. "I was just doing my job," I mumbled. The detective smiled. "You did a lot more than that. You showed real courage. Have you ever considered a career in law enforcement?" I laughed weakly. "I think I've had enough excitement for one lifetime, thanks." But as I watched the police continue to process the scene, I felt something shift inside me. The fear and adrenaline were fading, replaced by a sense of purpose I'd never felt before. I realized that my nights of quiet security shifts and writing fiction were over. I'd glimpsed a world of real danger and real heroism, and I couldn't go back to pretending. In the weeks that followed, I found myself thinking more and more about the detective's words. Maybe I did have what it took to make a difference in the real world, not just on the pages of my novel. 6 months later, I enrolled in the police academy. It wasn't an easy decision, and the training was brutal. But every time I doubted myself, I remembered that night in the warehouse. I remembered the courage I'd found when it mattered most. Now, as I patrol the streets in my police cruiser, I sometimes think back to my old job at the warehouse. I think about how one ordinary night changed the course of my life forever, and I realize that sometimes the greatest adventures and the greatest dangers are hiding in the most unexpected places. All it takes is the courage to investigate that strange noise in the night, and the wisdom to know when to call for backup. I never thought a cheap motel room would become my own personal hell. But as I huddled in the bathroom, listening to the sound of someone picking the lock, I realized that sometimes the most dangerous predators hide behind the friendliest smiles. My name's Mike, and I'm a traveling salesman. Yeah, I know, it sounds like the setup for a bad joke. But it's my life, driving from town to town, staying in one dingy motel after another. You get used to it after a while, or at least I thought I had. It was a Tuesday night in late October when I pulled into the parking lot of the Starlight Motel. The neon sign flickered weakly, half the bulbs burnt out, but it was cheap, and I was tired after a long day of rejections and slammed doors. The guy at the front desk looked like he'd been there since the motel opened, probably sometime in the 70s. He had that overly friendly demeanor that always puts me on edge, asking too many questions as he checked me in. "So, what brings you to our little town, Mr. Johnson?" he asked, his smile never quite reaching his eyes. "Just passing through," I replied, trying to keep it vague. "Got some business in the next county over." He nodded, a little too enthusiastically. Of course. Lot of salesmen come through here. Always on the move, aren't you? Must be lonely." I forced a laugh, eager to get to my room and away from his probing questions. It has its moments, but hey, that's the job. He handed me the key, an actual metal key, not one of those electronic cards. "Well, you enjoy your stay now. If you need anything at all, just let old Bob know." I thanked him and headed to my room, trying to shake off the uneasy feeling his attention had given me. The room was about what you'd expect: musty smell, faded wallpaper, a TV that had seen better days. But the bed looked clean enough, and that was all I really cared about. I dropped my bags and flopped onto the bed, not even bothering to take off my shoes. I must have dozed off, because the next thing I knew, I was jolted awake by a knock at the door. Groggy and disoriented, I stumbled to answer it. Bob stood there, that same too-wide smile on his face. "Sorry to bother you, Mr. Johnson," he said, not sounding sorry at all. "Just wanted to check if everything was all right. Noticed your car had a flat tire." I blinked, confusion giving way to alarm. "What? But I just drove in. How could—" "Oh, these things happen." He cut me off smoothly. "Tell you what, why don't you come take a look? I'm pretty handy with cars. Might be able to help you out." Every instinct I had was screaming at me not to go with him, but I was still half asleep, and the thought of being stranded with a flat tire in the morning was enough to override my caution. "Sure," I said, grabbing my jacket. "Lead the way." We walked out to the parking lot, the night air chilly against my face. As we approached my car, I noticed something odd. All the tires looked fine. I turned to Bob, my mouth open to question him, when I saw the glint of metal in his hand. Before I could react, something hard connected with the side of my head. The world spun, then went black. I came to slowly, my head pounding. As my vision cleared, I realized I was back in my motel room, tied to a chair. Bob stood in front of me, that friendly smile now twisted into something sinister. Well, he chuckled. "Sleeping Beauty awakes. You know, Mr. Johnson, you salesmen are all the same. So trusting, so easy to lure." Fear clawed at my throat as the reality of my situation sank in. What do you want from me?" Bob's eyes glittered with a mix of greed and madness. "Oh, it's not about what I want. It's about what you have. You see, salesmen always carry cash, always have something valuable in those fancy little sample cases of yours." He moved to my bags, rifling through them with practiced ease. "But that's not all," he continued, almost conversationally. "You're also perfect victims, always on the move. No one misses you for days, sometimes weeks." My blood ran cold as I realized the implications of his words. How many others had fallen into this trap? How many lives had ended in this very room? As Bob continued to search my belongings, I tested my bonds. The ropes were tight, but there was a slight give in the one around my right wrist. If I could just... "Don't bother," Bob said, not even turning around. "I've done this enough times to know how to tie a knot." Panic threatened to overwhelm me, but I forced it down. I needed to think, to find a way out of this. "Listen," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "You don't have to do this. I won't tell anyone. Just take my money and let me go." Bob turned to me, shaking his head with mock sadness. Now, you know I can't do that. Can't have you running to the cops, can I?" "No, I'm afraid this is where your journey ends, Mr. Johnson." He pulled out a wicked-looking knife, the blade catching the dim light. "But don't worry, I'll make it quick. I'm not a monster, after all." As he approached me, knife raised, something in me snapped. With strength born of desperation, I threw myself backwards, chair and all. I crashed to the floor, the impact sending shockwaves of pain through my body. But it also loosened the ropes just enough. Bob lunged at me, but I managed to roll away, my right hand now free. I grabbed the nearest object, a table lamp, and swung it with all my might. It connected with Bob's head with a sickening crunch, and he went down hard. For a moment, I just lay there, gasping for breath. Then, moving as quickly as I could with my limbs still partially bound, I worked to free myself completely. Once loose, I didn't waste any time. I grabbed my wallet and car keys, not bothering with the rest of my belongings. As I ran for the door, I heard Bob groan. He was starting to come around. I burst out of the room and sprinted for my car, fumbling with the keys. Behind me, I could hear Bob shouting, his footsteps pounding on the pavement. I threw myself into the driver's seat, jammed the key into the ignition, and peeled out of the parking lot in a spray of gravel. In my rearview mirror, I saw Bob standing in the middle of the road, his face a mask of rage. I drove for hours, my hands shaking on the steering wheel, expecting at any moment to see headlights gaining on me. It wasn't until the sun started to rise that I finally allowed myself to relax slightly. I pulled into a busy truck stop, my mind racing. I needed to call the police, but a part of me was terrified they wouldn't believe me. What if Bob had friends in law enforcement? What if this was all part of some bigger operation? In the end, I decided to keep driving. I crossed state lines, only stopping when absolutely necessary. It wasn't until I was 3 states away that I finally worked up the courage to go to the police. The detective who took my statement listened with a grim expression. "You're not the first to report something like this," he said when I finished. "We've had similar stories from other travelers, but you're the first to get away and be able to identify the perpetrator." Over the next few weeks, I worked with the police, helping them build a case against Bob in the Starlight Motel. It turned out I was right. It was part of a larger operation. Bob was just one cog in a machine that had been preying on travelers for years. When they finally made the arrests, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. But the relief was short-lived. The experience had changed me in ways I was only beginning to understand. I couldn't go back to my old job. The thought of driving from town to town, staying in motels, filled me with a dread I couldn't shake. Instead, I found a local sales position, one that let me go home to my own bed every night. Sometimes, when I'm lying awake at night, I think about how close I came to becoming just another missing person, another unsolved mystery. I think about the others who weren't as lucky as me, whose stories ended in that dingy motel room, and I realize that the world is full of Bobs, predators hiding behind friendly smiles and helpful gestures. It's a knowledge that weighs heavy on me, but it's also made me more aware, more cautious. Now, when I check into a hotel or meet a stranger, I'm always on guard. Some might call it paranoia, but I know better. Because sometimes, the most dangerous threats aren't the ones that look scary on the surface. Sometimes, they're the ones that lure you in with a smile and a, "How can I help you today?" In the end, I learned that trust is a precious thing, not to be given away lightly. And that sometimes, the difference between life and death can be as simple as listening to that little voice inside that says, "Something's not right here." I survived my night at the Starlight Motel, but the real challenge has been learning to live with the knowledge of what lurks behind some of the friendliest facades. It's a lesson I'll never forget, and one I hope others can learn without having to go through what I did. Because something about him set my nerves on edge, but I brushed it off. I'd learned not to judge passengers by their appearance. He slid into the back seat, bringing with him the smell of rain and cigarettes. "Thanks for stopping," he said, his voice low and gravelly. "Not many drivers come to this neighborhood." I forced a smile, meeting his eyes in the rearview mirror. They were dark and intense, sending a shiver down my spine. "No problem," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "Where to?" He gave me an address about an hour outside of town. It was way out of my usual area, but the fare would be substantial. I punched it into my GPS and pulled away from the curb. For the first few minutes, we drove in silence. The only sounds were the rhythmic swish of the wipers and the patter of rain on the roof. I tried to focus on the road, but I could feel his eyes on me, watching my every move. "So," I said, desperate to break the tension, "what brings you out to the middle of nowhere on a night like this?" He was quiet for so long I thought he hadn't heard me. When he finally spoke, his words sent ice through my veins. "I'm running from something," he said. "Something bad." I gripped the steering wheel tighter, my knuckles turning white. "Oh," I managed to squeak out. "Like what?" He leaned forward, his breath hot on my ear. "The police," he whispered. "I've done something terrible, and they're after me." My heart was pounding so hard I was sure he could hear it. I tried to keep my voice calm as I asked, What did you do?" He sat back, and I could hear the smile in his voice. "Why don't you pull over and I'll show you?" Every instinct I had was screaming at me to floor it, to get as far away from this man as possible. But we were on a deserted stretch of highway, trees looming on either side. There was nowhere to go. I don't think that's a good idea," I stammered. "Maybe I should just take you to your destination." His hand shot out, gripping my shoulder with surprising strength. "Pull over. Now." I did as he said, easing the car onto the muddy shoulder. As soon as we stopped, I felt something cold and hard press against the back of my neck. I didn't need to look to know it was a gun. "Now," he said, his voice eerily calm, "here's what's going to happen. You're going to get out of the car nice and slow, then you're going to get in the back seat. I'm driving now." My mind raced, trying to think of a way out, but with a gun to my head, my options were limited. Slowly, I unbuckled my seatbelt and opened the door, stepping out into the rain. As I moved to the back seat, I caught a glimpse of his face in the glow of the dome light. His eyes were wild, pupils dilated. Whatever he was running from, whatever he had done, I knew I was in serious danger. He slid into the driver's seat, keeping the gun trained on me. "Phone," he barked. I handed it over, watching as he rolled down the window and tossed it into the darkness. As we pulled back onto the highway, I tried to stay calm, to think rationally. "Listen," I said, my voice shaking despite my best efforts. "You don't have to do this. I won't tell anyone, I swear. Just let me go." He laughed, a harsh, humorless sound. "It's too late for that. You're in this now, whether you like it or not." For the next hour, we drove in tense silence. I watched the familiar landscape give way to rolling hills and dense forests. We were heading into the mountains, far from any help. Finally, he turned onto a narrow dirt road, barely visible in the gloom. The car bounced and swayed as we climbed higher, deeper into the wilderness. We came to a stop in front of a small, rundown cabin. "Out," he ordered, gesturing with the gun. Inside, the cabin was sparse. A table, a couple of chairs, a small kitchenette. He motioned for me to sit, then began pacing, muttering to himself. "What are you going to do with me?" I asked, hating how small my voice sounded. He stopped pacing, fixing me with those intense eyes. "I haven't decided yet," he said. "Depends on how cooperative you are." Hours passed. He alternated between manic energy, ranting about conspiracies and people out to get him, and eerie calm. I tried to engage him, to build some kind of rapport, but he was unpredictable. One moment he'd be almost friendly, the next he'd be pressing the gun to my temple, accusing me of working with them. As dawn broke, painting the cabin in pale light, I heard a sound that made my heart leap. Sirens, faint but growing louder. My captor heard it too, his face contorted with rage. "You!" he screamed. "You led them here somehow." I shook my head frantically. "No, I swear. How could I? You took my phone, remember?" But he wasn't listening. He grabbed me roughly, dragging me to my feet. "We're leaving. Now." He shoved me toward the door, the gun pressed painfully into my back. But as we stepped outside, I saw salvation, a line of police cars coming up the dirt road, lights flashing. What happened next was a blur. My captor yelled something, pushing me in front of him like a shield. I heard shouts from the police, ordering him to drop the weapon, then a deafening crack, and I was falling. I hit the ground hard, the breath knocked out of me. For a moment I thought I'd been shot, but as I gasped for air, I realized I was unharmed. My captor lay a few feet away, blood pooling beneath him. The next few hours passed in a haze of paramedics, police questions, and shock blankets. I learned that the man, whose real name was Eric Daniels, was wanted for a string of violent crimes across 3 states. My disappearance had triggered a massive manhunt, leading the police right to his hideout. As I sat in the back of an ambulance, watching the sun rise over the mountains, the full weight of what had happened began to sink in. I had stared death in the face and survived. But at what cost? In the weeks that followed, I struggled to return to normal life. Every car that pulled up beside me at a stoplight made my heart race. Every ping from my phone sent a jolt of fear through me. I couldn't bring myself to drive for the rideshare company again, or to drive at all for that matter. But slowly, with the help of therapy and the support of my friends and family, I began to heal. I learned that survival itself is a victory, that strength isn't about not being afraid, but about facing that fear and moving forward anyway. I still have nightmares sometimes, still flinch at unexpected noises, but I'm reclaiming my life, piece by piece. I've started volunteering at a local crisis center, using my experience to help others who have faced trauma. And on the anniversary of that terrifying night, I did something I never thought I'd do again. I got behind the wheel of a car. I drove up into those same mountains, not to relive the horror, but to remind myself of how far I've come. As I stood there, looking out over the vast wilderness that had once been my prison, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. The road ahead might be long and sometimes frightening, but I know now that I have the strength to face whatever comes my way. Because sometimes, the most important journey isn't the one that takes us to a physical destination. It's the one that leads us back to ourselves, stronger and more resilient than ever before.